Good day everyone. For this lecture video, we are going to discuss the 6 remaining simulation modeling processes. So we are already done with problem formulation and project planning. So basically, we will proceed first to system definition, followed by input data collection, model translation, verification, validation, and implementation. So, without further ado, let's proceed to the system definition. Now, the system definition phase of the simulator model consists of identification of the following. So, these three things here listed in bullet form, you have to identify this first kapag mag-simulate ka na ng model. So, first, you have to identify kung anong system component pa yung imamodel mo. Second, ano yung mga input data na kailangan mong i-collect? So, when we say input data, yung mga information na ipapasok mo sa model mo. And third, what output data to generate with the model? Ibig sabihin, what is the expected data that will came out from the model? So, those are the three things that you should consider in identifying first when it comes to system definition. So let's start with identification of system components to model. Now, the specific system components na pwede mong i-model will vary depending on both the general type of training simulator and the specific application itself. So in particular, the needs of management type training simulators and equipment type training simulators are quite diverse. So according here, yung system components na i-model mo, nakadepende yan siya sa kung anong klaseng, let's say, real-world system siya. And ano yung specific application niya. Now, going back to the general type of training, meron tayong dalawang pagpipilian dyan. So, we have the management type training simulator at saka equipment type training simulator. So, let's start with the management training simulator. So, for management training simulator, we would consider modeling these three things here. So, you can model the input decision that can be made by the user. Next is the mathematical model of the process that translate inputs into outputs. And then third is the output resulting from the input decision made by the user. So, with this consideration for modeling, itong tatlong yan, we can immediately identify that itong management training simulator, ang view ng practitioner or modeler is the user and then system and output relationship. So let me draw that one. Yeah. So this is the relationship of management training simulator. It is between the process of user putting input into the system and then the system showing output. Okay? So first, itong the input decision that can be made by the user. So, ito siya, itong first consideration natin, this is between this relationship here, user at saka system. So, pwede mo yan siyang i-model. Paano naglalagay o nagpapapasok ng input sa user sa system? What kind of input ba yun? What if how different types of input data go into the system? How different amount of data go into the system? So, pwede mo yan siyang i-simulate. Gawan mo siya ng model. So, that's the first consideration. Now, for the second consideration, the mathematical model of the process that translate inputs into output. So, ito naman siya, this is between the system. Okay. So, itong second consideration, this is between the relationship of user system at saka output. So, itong tatlo talaga. So So accordingly here, the mathematical model of the process to translate inputs into outputs. So pwede mong i-model on how the system processes the inputs into outputs. So you can model that one. And then the third consideration is the output resulting from the input decision made by the user. So this is also between the relationship of user, system, and then output. But more on priority na talaga on the output side. No? So that's for the management training simulators. Now let's proceed to equipment type simulator. So for equipment type simulator, the practitioner would model these three things. So the equipment itself, so how the equipment work from powering it on to powering it off, followed by yung normal operation of the equipment. So for this one, you have to assume that the model will run smoothly without any errors, faulty, or technical problems. And third naman, you can also model yung mga abnormal operation of the equipment. So, for this part, you have to assume that maraming technical problems, maraming missing resources, or what if na ay mga problem sa technicalities, what if kulang ang mga resources, what if mali ang input nga data into the model. So, you can also simulate that in the equipment type simulator. Now, regardless kung ang pipiliin mo is management type simulator ba yan siya or equipment type simulator, you have to program the simulator components through the following operating modes. So, meron tayong tatlong operating modes. So, we have instructional, training, and test mode. So, let's start with instructional mode. Itong instructional mode, this is intended para mag-provide sa user with all the necessary information para maintindihan niya on how the system is modeled in the simulator. So, let me highlight the meaning. And itong instructional mode, meron siyang dalawang set, no? We have the static or interactive screens. Yan. So, let's start with the static screens. So, the static screens, ang makikita mo sa mga screen na ito, no, is form of paragraph na instructions. Yung detailed na instructions that is needed for the practitioner to understand how the system should be modeled in the simulator. And ito namang interactive screens, instead of using paragraphs or words as instruction, more on graphical siya. So, mayroong mga pictures na pinipresent. And when interactive screen is used, no, for the instructional mode, kailangan all of the different angles of the real-world system should be covered. So, when I say covered, lahat ng yun dapat may pictures talaga. Okay? So, for example, when some components are located in the front and side of the engines, dapat may picture din yan siya. Okay? This means that the practitioner will need to have graphic images of both of these views. Okay? Para naman ma-navigate ng practitioner on what are the different parts of the real-world system. Okay, so that's for the instructional mode. So we have two sets, static at saka interactive screen. Now, let's proceed naman sa training mode. Okay. So, the second operating mode is ang training mode. So, this mode is, ito talaga yung commonly na ginagamit, no, for simulating. No? This is the primary operating mode of the simulator. Now, in this mode, the practitioner will attempt to replicate the actual functioning of the management process or equipment. So, kanang actual, may si actual, from start to beginning, iyahad yun nang i-replicate. Okay. Kasi dun sa instructional kanina, more on detailed instruction lang words or graphics on the different angles, different sides of the real-world system. Now here, sa training mode, is from the beginning process to the end process of the real-world system. Ginagaya niya talaga. Gina-replicate niya. So, it can be either management process or equipment. So, let's start with management process. How does the training mode work in management process simulator? Here, sa management process simulators, the training mode will need to accept input decision na made by the user, and then after that, the simulator will then take the input and run them through the mathematical simulator problem. And then yung mathematical simulator model will then display the output results of the user decision. So that's for the management process simulator. Now, how about equipment simulator? Okay. So, dito sa equipment simulator, ang training mode niya will accept user input na in a form of manipulating the operating controls. So, when we say operating controls, ito yung how do you use the different parts of the equipment. Example, na mga buttons dito. So, if i-click ang button, unsay may tabo. Let's say, for example, na mga different levers nga dapat nimo i-pull. And when you pull that, mga levers, what will happen to the real-world system? So, for example, so users should be able to power the equipment, operate the equipment, and power down the equipment. So, yan ang ginagawa sa training mode when we're talking about equipment simulator. And now, for the last mode is the test mode. So, this can be used to present textual or graphic questions to the user. So, basically, question-based siya nga mode. So, in the case of textual question, so the user should be presented with a single question then multiple answers. And then, kung ano man yung answer ni user, then that will help the practitioner for simulating the model. And for the graphic version of the test mode, this can be designed to present the name of a particular component of the equipment. So, parang identification kind of question siya, in which merong presented na mga list of name of the equipment components. Let's say, for example, going back sa taas, for example, may mga list of names such as raw water pump, primary fuel filter, secondary fuel filter, oil filter, at saka coolant tank. So, itong sa graphical version of the test mode, meron ding mga, aside from those component names, no, yung oil filter, mga raw water pump, ganyan, meron ding mga pictures. Okay? And then, the user will identify which of those picture pertains the components indicated. Asa ba dito sa pictures ang oil filter? Asa dito ang water pump? So, i-click na nila ang mga pictures. And that will serve as their answer. Okay, so that's for the graphic version of test mode. So, those are the three modes in programming the simulator component. So, we have the instructional mode, which naa siya duha ka set, the static and interactive screen. The training mode, which is the primary mode in simulating a model. So, lastly, we have the test mode, which is composed into, or it can be identified in two types. We have textual question or the graphical version. Okay? So, yun. Now, let's proceed naman sa what input data to collect. So, ano ba yung mga kailangan na data natin i-collect to model a system or a real-world system? So, the type of training simulator that is being developed will dictate what type of input data is needed to be collected. So, if nakapili ka ng training simulator, it can be management or training. It can be management or equipment type. So, nakadepende yung i-collect mo na data. Okay? So, for management training type simulator, the practitioner will need to collect data on mga different types of scenarios, the different types of responses to the different types of scenarios, at saka the different types of outcomes resulting from the different types of scenarios. So, itong tatlo, sunod-sunod dyan sila. Okay? Hindi siya pwede gawin in any order. Okay. So, a management training simulator must be able to recreate most, if not all of the scenarios that the user may encounter in real life. So, ibig sabihin, the practitioner must be able to include mga historical data din and other parameters that may be relevant to each particular scenario. Okay, so that's for the management type, no? Okay, so let's proceed naman sa operational training type simulator or di kaya equipment type. So, same lang yan sila ha, iba lang yung name dito na ginamit. So, this is still equipment type. Ito, I don't know bakit naging operational yung nilagay nila dyan. So, the practitioner will need to collect data that represents the equipment in different functional states. So, this may include yung graphic images of the static components of the equipment, graphic images of the dynamic component of the equipment, and then equipment sounds during normal operation, and equipment sounds during abnormal operation. Okay? So, those are the different input data that you should collect kapag management type training siya or di kaya equipment type training. Now, let's proceed to the third system components na kailangan natin i-identify. So, we have, ano ba yung next? What output data to generate with the model. So, we already know how to identify the system component to my model. We already know kung ano yung input data na kailangan i-collect. Now, let's proceed naman sa ano yung mga output na kailangan i-generate with the model. Okay. So, here listed the different output that should be generated with the model. Now, let's proceed to the last part of system definition, which is the identification if what kind of output data should be generated with the model. So, yung output data natin, same lang din siya sa input. Nakadepende siya kung anong type of training simulator yung gagamitin natin. So, for the management training type, so ito yung mga output data that should be generated. So, first, the utility or success of the user's management decision. Okay? The speed with which the user makes decision. And then, resources that the user consumes in making the decision. And consequences of the user's decision. For the operational training type naman, or di kaya equipment type simulator, this may include how well the user can identify the equipment components or control, how correctly the user sets up or operates the equipment, how long it takes the user to set up or operate the equipment, and how well the operator can respond to different malfunctions. So that's for the system definition.